7 objects, each roughly the size of Manhattan, replied Dr. Kozlov, tucking a strand of grey hair behind her ear. They're slowing down. Whatever they are, they're not natural. The GSDI base buzzed with frantic activity. Scientists ran between computer stations, military personnel secured communication lines to world capitals, and technicians struggled to keep the power systems running as they diverted all resources to the long-range scanners. 3 days later, the first transmission came. The signal bypassed all Earth's communication systems, appearing simultaneously on every screen across the planet. The image showed a tall, slender being with metallic blue skin and 4 glowing eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. People of Earth. The translation software rendered in a flat mechanical voice. You now exist within the borders of the galactic hegemony. Your world has been catalogued, assessed, and found worthy of inclusion. Consider this an honor. In the GSDI conference room, world leaders gathered via secure holographic projections. The President of the United Nations Security Council wiped sweat from his brow. What do they want from us? As if answering his question, the alien transmission continued. As is customary, newly discovered civilizations will provide tribute to demonstrate their understanding of the natural order. You have 1 planetary cycle to prepare your offering, Doctor. Kozlov's team worked around the clock to analyze the alien language and technology. On the 5th day, Dr. Patel burst into her office, eyes wide with excitement and fear. We've decoded more of their transmissions, he said, handing her a tablet. They call themselves the Raxians. They've been expanding through this arm of the galaxy for at least 10,000 years. Dr. Kozlov scrolled through the data, her face growing paler. And these images, are these confirmed? Dr. Patel nodded grimly. From their own records, planets that refused to provide tribute, the images showed barren worlds, some cracked open, like eggs, others covered in storms that raged across entire continents. When the full translation of their demands arrived, Dr. Kozlov personally delivered it to the emergency United Nations session in Geneva. She stood before the assembled representatives, her hands steady despite her racing heart. The Raxians expect us to provide 30% of Earth's rare minerals, 10% of our fresh water, and 5,000 humans for what they call imperial research, she announced. The room erupted in shocked outcries. And if we refuse, asked the Japanese representative. They use the term planetary readjustment, Dr. Kozlov replied. Based on intercepted communications between their ships, we believe this means they will eliminate between 40 to 60% of Earth's population as a demonstration. That night, as she looked up at the stars from her office window, Dr. Kozlov noticed they no longer seemed beautiful or mysterious. They looked cold, threatening. Somewhere in that darkness, decisions were being made about humanity's future without humanity's consent. We have 1 month, she whispered to herself. 1 month to decide if we bow down or find a way to fight back against an empire that spans the stars. The Grand Hall of the United Nations in Geneva had never felt so small. World leaders sat shoulder to shoulder, their usual rivalries forgotten in the face of something far more threatening. Outside, crowds gathered behind police barriers, their faces turned upward at the massive Raxian shuttle that hovered above the building, casting a shadow that seemed to stretch across the entire city. "They're coming down," whispered the Secretary General, watching the live feed from the roof. The double doors swung open. 4 human-sized robots entered first, their metal bodies gleaming under the lights. Then came Ambassador Vexthor. The Raxian stood nearly 3 meters tall, with a body covered in scales that shifted colors like oil on water. Its 4 arms ended in hands with 7 fingers each, and its face, if you could call it that, was a smooth mask with 3 vertical slits where eyes should be. "I bring greetings from the Eternal Emperor," said Vexthor, its voice translated through a device at its throat. The sound was almost musical, rising and falling in strange patterns. "Your world has been honored with inclusion in the greatest civilization in this spiral arm of the galaxy." The Chinese premier leaned forward. "We appreciate the recognition, but Earth has its own civilization. We have not asked to join yours." A ripple passed through Vexthor's scales, turning them momentarily red before settling back to blue and green. "Asking is not part of the process," The strong expand, the weak are organized. This is the natural order. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as Vexthor activated a holographic display. Three-dimensional images of minerals, water reservoirs, and human bodies rotated. Slowly in the air, your tribute will consist of three components, continued the ambassador. First, 30% of your rare earth elements, particularly lithium, cobalt, and neodymium. Second, 10% of your planet's fresh water. And third, 5,000 human specimens for imperial research. The president of Brazil stood up suddenly. People, you want our people? For study only, replied Vexthor, its scales now pulsing with purple light. The Empire collects biological diversity. Your species has several unique genetic adaptations that interest our scientists. Dr. Kozlov, seated near the back as a technical advisor, tapped furiously on her tablet. The translation AI had picked up sub-channel communications between Vexthor and the shuttle above. What she read made her blood run cold. The German Chancellor spoke next. And if we find these terms unacceptable? Vexthor's scaled head tilted slightly. Then planetary readjustment will be necessary. This is not a punishment, it is efficiency. Too many humans consuming too many resources makes your world unstable. A reduction would be beneficial for those who remain. Reduction? Asked the Indian. Prime Minister, what percentage are we talking about? 40 to 60% of current population levels would be removed, replied Vexthor, as casually as if discussing the weather. Quick, painless. The Empire is not cruel. Dr. Kozlov raised her hand, catching the Secretary General's eye. He nodded, giving her permission to speak. Ambassador, she said, standing, our calculations suggest that such a readjustment would kill between 3 and 5 billion human beings. Vexthor turned toward her, scales shifting to a deep blue. Your calculations are correct. Those selected would feel nothing. The Empire's methods are advanced. You have one planetary cycle to prepare your tribute. I will return for your answer. Then, as Vexthor and its robotic guards left the chamber, not a single person spoke. The only sound was the distant crying of a baby somewhere outside, drifting in through the windows, a reminder of exactly what was at stake. The emergency summit in London was falling apart. 3 weeks had passed since Ambassador Vexthor delivered the Raxian ultimatum, and Earth's nations had splintered into competing factions. The grand meeting hall of the old Parliament building echoed with raised voices as leaders shouted over one another. We cannot simply hand over our people like cattle, thundered the French president, slamming his fist on the ancient wooden table. And we cannot sacrifice billions by provoking them, countered the German Chancellor. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes from endless strategy sessions. The European coalition proposes continued negotiation. Perhaps we can bargain. Down their demands, laughter, bitter and harsh, came from the Russian defense minister. Negotiate? With an empire that sees us as nothing but resources? You might as well try to reason with a hurricane. Outside the windows, protesters filled the streets. Some carried signs begging for peace at any cost. Others demanded resistance. Families huddled around public screens in every city on Earth, watching the summit that would decide humanity's fate. The Japanese Prime Minister stood next. His normally perfect suit was wrinkled, as if he'd been sleeping in it. The Pacific Alliance believes we should appear to comply while secretly building defensive capabilities. We buy time, strengthen our position, and prepare for a future opportunity to break free. How long would that take? Asked the Brazilian president. 5 years? 10? How many specimens do we sacrifice while waiting? Dr. Kozlov sat in the corner, representing the Global Space Defense Initiative. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night since Geneva. Her team had been analyzing every scrap of Raxian technology they could detect from Earth's most powerful telescopes. There is another option, said the American president, her voice cutting through the chaos. The room fell silent. The American-Russian cooperative has been developing a response that could end this threat immediately. The Russian president nodded to his military chief, who activated a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed Earth's nuclear arsenals, thousands of warheads that had been aimed at each other for decades, now potentially united against a common enemy. "This is madness," whispered the Indian Prime Minister. "Their ships are shielded. Our most powerful weapons couldn't penetrate their defenses." "Conventional delivery methods. No," agreed the American president, "but Dr. Kozlov's team has made a breakthrough." The year was 2057 when humanity first detected the massive Raxian warships entering the solar system. Dr. Elena Kozlov stared at the radar screens in the underground command center of the Global Space Defense Initiative. Her coffee cup slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor, but nobody noticed. All eyes were fixed on the massive objects moving toward Earth. "What are we looking at?" asked Colonel Lee, his voice barely above a whisper. All eyes turned to Dr. Kozlov. She stood, slowly, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. "We've been studying the Raxian transmissions," she explained, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Their shields operate on a principle similar to our theoretical understanding of wormhole physics. They bend space around their ships." She tapped her tablet, and the hologram changed to show a new weapon design. "By modifying our nuclear warheads with quantum entanglement devices, we believe we can create a momentary connection directly inside their shields. In simple terms, we can teleport our weapons directly into their ships." The room erupted again. Some representatives shouted that it was too risky, others demanded immediate action. A Chinese general questioned if the technology would actually work. "It's never been tested at this scale," admitted Dr. Kozlov. "The probability of success is 63%. "And if we fail?" asked the South African president. "Then we face the same outcome as surrender," replied the Russian president grimly, "but at least we die fighting." As night fell over London, 3 clear factions had formed. The Europeans still pushing for negotiation, the Pacific nations pretending to prepare tribute while secretly building bunkers and weapons, and the American-Russian alliance already moving nuclear warheads to launch facilities, preparing for humanity's most desperate gamble. Dr. Kozlov stepped outside for a moment, looking up at the stars where Raxian ships waited. She wondered if they were watching this summit, laughing at how easily humans turned against each other when faced with fear. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a facility that didn't officially exist, General Lee gathered the greatest scientific minds humanity had to offer. The underground bunker hummed with activity as engineers and physicists worked around the clock, fueled by coffee, fear, and desperate hope. "We have 18 days before the Raxians return for their answer," General Lee announced, addressing the crowded war room. Her uniform was crisp despite the fact she hadn't left the facility in over a week. "That means 18 days to perfect Operation Trojan Horse." The gathered scientists looked exhausted but determined. They came from dozens of countries, former rivals now united by necessity. The walls were covered with equations, diagrams of Raxian ships and countdown clocks ticking away humanity's remaining time. "Dr. Petrov, update on radiation masking," General Lee asked. The Russian physicist stood, brushing crumbs from his beard. Once the Soviet Union's leading nuclear scientist, Dr. Petrov had defected decades ago, bringing revolutionary ideas with him. "We've cracked it," he said, his accent thick with fatigue. The problem was never just hiding the radiation signature. It was making the warheads completely invisible to Raxian sensors. He tapped a control pad, bringing up schematics on the main screen. "By incorporating a layer of metamaterials infused with quantum dots, we can bend all forms of detection around the devices. To their sensors, our weapons simply won't exist until detonation." Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. General Lee nodded. "And the delivery system?" Dr. Wong rose next. The quantum physicist had been working on teleportation theory before. The Raxians arrived, purely theoretical work that had suddenly become humanity's best hope for survival. "The entanglement drives are ready for installation," she said, adjusting her glasses. "We've solved the targeting issue by using particles captured from Raxian communication beams. In simple terms, we've created quantum twins of particles already, inside their ships. When activated, our warheads will instantly switch places with these entangled particles." "In English, Doctor," requested an exhausted military commander. Dr. Wong smiled thinly. "We can teleport our bombs inside their ships, bypassing their shields completely." The room erupted in questions. Would it work at such distances? How many warheads could they modify in time? What if the Raxians detected the quantum link? Enough, called General Lee, restoring order. Dr. Petrov and Dr. Wong have done the impossible. Now we need to implement their work. In the corner, Professor Kumar, an elderly Indian physicist, spoke up. There's something we haven't discussed. The room fell silent. Kumar was respected not just for his brilliant mind, but for his moral wisdom. The ethics of what we're proposing. Ethics? Scoffed a military officer. They're threatening to kill billions, and we're planning to annihilate their entire fleet, Kumar replied calmly. Thousands, perhaps millions of their kind. Do we know they all support this empire? Are there civilians aboard those ships, children? Uncomfortable silence followed. Dr. Petrov rubbed his tired eyes. The Raxians gave us no choice. This is survival. I agree, said Kumar sadly. But we should recognize what this means. We are about to become the first human interstellar killers. That will define our species for all time. General Lee studied the faces around her. Scientists who had devoted their lives to discovery, now building weapons of unprecedented destruction. Soldiers prepared to fight an enemy from beyond the stars. We call it the Trojan Protocol, she said finally, and history can judge us when there's someone left to write it. Later that night, Dr. Wong found Dr. Petrov staring at a photo of his grandchildren. Will it work? She asked quietly. Truly. He didn't look up. The physics is sound, but no one has ever attempted quantum entanglement at this scale across such distances. It's like trying to thread a needle in the dark, wearing boxing gloves while riding a motorcycle. So we're doomed. Dr. Petrov finally looked up, tucking the photo away. Maybe. But humans have always been good at doing the impossible when our backs are against the wall. Outside the facility, spring flowers were blooming in mountain meadows. Neither scientist had seen the sun in weeks. Somewhere above them, Raxian. Ships waited. Unaware that humanity had chosen not to go quietly into extinction, the shuttle ascended through clouds tinged orange by the setting sun. Inside, Earth's delegation sat in tense silence. Ambassador Singh adjusted his tie for the 20th time, trying to calm his trembling hands. Beside him, 24 diplomats and scientists represented every major nation on Earth. They were humanity's face in what might be its final hours. Remember, Ambassador Singh said quietly, we are bringing what appears to be the first installment of tribute. We express gratitude for the Empire's patience. We request more time for the full delivery. No one responded. They all knew their lines in this desperate play. Through the shuttle windows, the Raxian mothership grew larger, blotting out the stars. It was enormous, a structure of gleaming metal and pulsing lights that stretched over 20 kilometers from end to end. Smaller, ships surrounded it like remoras around a shark. Major Tanaka sat near the back, dressed as a diplomatic security officer. Her real role was known only to 6 people on Earth. Inside a modified heart monitor, strapped to her chest, was the quantum trigger, a device no larger than a playing card that could deliver mankind's final answer to the galactic hegemony. 100 warheads, she thought, recalling the briefing. 30 in the mothership, the rest distributed through the fleet. The quantum entanglement had been established during the night, when the warheads were secretly launched into high orbit, appearing as nothing more than routine satellite deployments. The shuttle docked with a metallic clang. Ambassador Singh turned to the group. Whatever happens next, know that you have honored your species and your ancestors. Raxian guards met them at the airlock, tall scaled beings carrying energy weapons taller than a human. Behind them stood Ambassador Vex Thor, scales shifting in patterns of blue and green. Welcome aboard the Eternal Light, said Vex Thor. The Imperial Overseer is pleased by your prompt response. The delegation was escorted through corridors that seemed to bend at impossible angles. Major Tanaka memorized every turn, noting defensive positions and access points. Her training as a Special Forces operative had never prepared her for a mission like this. They entered a vast chamber with a domed ceiling that displayed what appeared to be a real-time view of stars and galaxies. At the center stood a raised platform, where a Raxian larger than the others sat on an ornate throne. Its scales were pure white, and it wore a collar of glowing crystals. "The Imperial Overseer," announced Vexthor, bowing deeply. Ambassador Singh stepped forward with the practiced humility of a career diplomat. "Great Overseer, Earth is honored by your presence. We bring the first installment of our tribute as a demonstration of our commitment to peaceful integration with the galactic hegemony." Behind him, assistants opened containers revealing water purified to perfect clarity, rare minerals that glittered under the chamber's lights, and biological samples, all carefully selected to appear valuable while revealing nothing truly important. "About Earth," the Overseer spoke, its voice deeper than Vexthor's. "Your tribute is insufficient. Where are the human specimens?" Singh swallowed hard. "Great Overseer, selecting appropriate specimens requires careful consideration. We request an additional planetary cycle to—" "Denied," interrupted the Overseer. "Your species tests our patience. Perhaps you require a demonstration of Imperial authority." Major Tanaka felt sweat trickle down her spine. Her hand moved imperceptibly toward the trigger beneath her jacket. The plan had been to wait until they were shown more of the ship, to gather intelligence on Raxian technology. But if the Overseer gave the order to attack Earth now— "We have brought volunteers," said Singh quickly. "Scientists who wish to learn about your great civilization. They offer themselves freely as the first specimens." 5 members of the delegation stepped forward, their faces masks of determination. They were not actually volunteers, they were military personnel with implanted recording devices, prepared to sacrifice themselves to gather more information. The Overseer's scales rippled with interest. "Acceptable. They will be processed immediately." As Raxian guards led the 5 away, Major Tanaka caught the eye of Dr. Kumar, one of the volunteers. He gave her the slightest of nods. Their silent message was clear. "Not yet. Wait for the signal." Tama. Deception was working, but the clock was ticking. Somewhere in the vast ship, 5 brave humans were about to face the unknown, buying time for a plan that might save humanity, or doom it completely. For 3 days, the human delegation walked a tightrope of deception. Ambassador Singh led endless discussions about tribute quantities and delivery timelines, pretending to negotiate while actually gathering intelligence on Raxian ship layouts. The 5 volunteers had been taken to different sections of the mothership, each carrying hidden sensors to map the vessel's critical systems. On the morning of the 3rd day, Major Tanaka received the coded message hidden in Ambassador Singh's routine update to Earth. "All birds in position." The 5 volunteers had identified key targets. It was time, but something was wrong. Raxian guards seemed more numerous in the corridors. The delegation's movements were suddenly restricted to their quarters and the negotiation chamber. Major Tanaka felt the weight of the quantum trigger against her chest as she watched Vexthor enter the room, its scales now pulsing angry red. "Your deception is discovered," announced the Raxian ambassador, its voice no longer musical but harsh and grating. 4 guards positioned themselves at the chamber doors. "Sensors have detected unauthorized transmission devices on the human specimens." Ambassador Singh maintained his diplomatic composure. "There must be some misunderstanding. Perhaps our medical implants." The blast from Vexthor's weapon silenced him mid-sentence. Ambassador Singh crumpled to the floor, a smoking hole where his heart had been. The chamber erupted in chaos as diplomats screamed and guards advanced. Major Tanaka reacted with trained precision. She flipped the conference table, creating momentary cover, then threw a flashbang grenade from her hidden belt pouch. The device exploded with blinding light and deafening sound, disorienting the Raxians, whose sensory systems were more sensitive than humans. "This way," she shouted to the surviving delegation members, firing her concealed weapon at the nearest guard. The energy pulse knocked the alien backward. "Follow me now or die here." Through smoke and confusion, she led the survivors into the corridor. Alarms wailed throughout the ship, a pulsing red light bathing everything in blood-colored illumination. Overhead, announcements in the Raxian language echoed incomprehensibly. "We need to split up," ordered Major Tanaka, her military training taking over. "They'll expect us to head for the shuttle bay." She pointed 3 diplomats down one corridor. "Head that way, create a diversion." She directed 4 more in another direction. "You 4 try to reach the shuttle, the rest with me." A blast of energy sizzled past her head as Raxian security forces appeared at the corridor junction. Major Tanaka returned fire, her weapon's charge already fading. "Go now!" she screamed as the group scattered. With 2 diplomats following, she sprinted down service passages mapped by the volunteers. Her destination, a communications hub where she might boost the quantum trigger's signal. Without it, the warheads wouldn't activate properly. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. One of the diplomats fell with a cry as an energy blast caught him in the back. The other stumbled to a halt. "Leave him," ordered Tanaka, grabbing the man's arm. "Nothing we can do." They reached a junction where corridors branched in 3 directions. Tanaka checked the rough map in her memory. "That way," she pointed, "should lead to auxiliary communications." A blast hit the wall beside, them spraying hot metal fragments. The remaining diplomat screamed as shrapnel tore into his face. Tanaka pulled him into the corridor, half dragging him forward as Raxian voices grew louder behind them. The communications bay doors slid open as they approached. Then the diplomat stiffened and fell forward, his back smoking from another direct hit. Tanaka dove inside, slapping the door control. The heavy metal panels slid shut just as Raxian guards rounded the corner. Blood soaked her left side where a fragment had pierced her ribs. Each breath sent sharp pain through her chest. Ignoring it, she barricaded the door with equipment panels, then turned to the communication array. The controls were alien, but the volunteers had provided basic operational instructions. She connected the quantum trigger to the ship's more powerful transmitters, her fingers slippery with blood as she worked. Outside, pounding on the door grew more insistent. A section began to glow red as Raxians used cutting tools to break through. Tanaka slumped against the console, strength fading. The trigger was connected. All she needed to do was activate it. Her finger hovered over the switch. "For Earth," she whispered, thinking of blue skies and green forests, of children playing in parks and old people feeding pigeons, of all that would be lost if she failed. The door began to melt inward as her finger pressed down on the activation switch. The moment Major Tanaka pressed the activation switch, a silence fell across the communications bay. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. The quantum trigger hummed softly, its lights blinking from red to green. Outside, the door continued to melt under Raxian cutting tools. "Did it fail?" she whispered, her hope fading. Then the ship lurched violently. The lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency illumination that bathed everything in eerie blue. The pounding at the door stopped. In the sudden quiet, she heard distant explosions. It was working. Across the vast hegemony fleet, 137 modified nuclear devices simultaneously materialized where they should never have been able to go, inside the quantum-shielded power cores of the Raxian vessels. The warheads didn't need to travel there. They simply exchanged places with particles already inside, thanks to Dr. Wong's entanglement technology. On the bridge of the Imperial command ship, the Overseer was reviewing plans for Earth's readjustment when alarms screamed across all systems. As subordinate scales flashed panic patterns of yellow and white. "Impossible energy signature detected in main reactor chamber," the officer shouted. The Overseer rose from its throne, white scales darkening with rage. "How could anything penetrate?" The warhead detonated. In an instant, the bridge and everyone on it vaporized as the nuclear blast ripped through the vessel's heart. But this was just the beginning. The explosion triggered the antimatter containment fields to collapse. Matter met antimatter in a catastrophic chain reaction that consumed the entire ship from within. What had been a massive structure of metal and energy became a miniature sun, expanding outward in a sphere of pure destruction. The same scene played out across the fleet. Smaller patrol ships erupted first, their reactors less stable. Then the mid-sized cruisers. One by one, vessels that had conquered 1,000 worlds succumbed to humanity's desperate gambit. In mission control beneath the Rocky Mountains, technicians watched their sensor displays with awe and horror. The quantum links transmitted confirmation of each successful detonation before being destroyed. 112 confirmed hits, called out a technician, her voice shaking. 123, 130. Dr. Petrov and Dr. Wong clutched each other's hands, their scientific rivalry forgotten in this moment of terrible triumph. "It worked," breathed Dr. Petrov. "God help us, it actually worked." On Earth's night side, people poured out of homes and buildings, pointing at the sky in wonder and fear. What appeared to be new stars were blinking into existence, flaring brilliantly before fading. Some wept, others prayed, most simply stared in silence as humanity's answer to the galactic hegemony wrote itself across the heavens. In orbit, around Jupiter, 3 Raxian science vessels that had been cataloguing the gas giant's moons detected the destruction of their fleet. Their commanders, horrified and confused, immediately engaged their faster-than-light drives, fleeing the solar system to report the unthinkable. A primitive species had somehow destroyed the invincible hegemony armada. Inside the communications bay, Major Tanaka dragged herself to a viewport as the mothership began to break apart around her. Through the reinforced glass, she witnessed the death of an empire that had lasted 10,000 years. Ship after ship bloomed into balls of light, creating a macabre constellation of human vengeance. The door finally gave way behind her. A single Raxian guard staggered in, its weapon raised. Its scales flashed patterns she hadn't seen before, perhaps fear, perhaps grief. "Your people are dead," it hissed through its translator. Major Tanaka smiled through blood-stained lips. "So are yours." As the mothership's reactor went critical, a final explosion outshining all the others, observers on Earth saw a burst of light so bright it briefly cast shadows in the middle of the night, a funeral pyre for enemies who never understood that humans would choose extinction on their own terms rather than submission on someone else's. Celebrations across Earth lasted less than 6 hours. In mountain bunkers and underground command centers, military leaders raised glasses to humanity's first interstellar victory. On streets and in homes, people embraced strangers, united in survival. News channels showed the night sky where fading lights marked the destruction of the Raxian fleet. No one noticed the 3 remaining ships that had been hidden behind Mars, shielded from the quantum attack. The first warning came from a deep space tracking station in Chile. The operator, exhausted after days without sleep, almost missed the movement on her screen. "Command, we have 3 objects accelerating toward Earth," she reported, her voice suddenly alert. Configuration matches Raxian design. By the time the warning reached Defense Headquarters, it was already too late. Fleet Commander Zorgval, second in command of the hegemony forces, had watched the destruction of the main fleet with cold fury. Unlike his arrogant superiors, he had taken Earth's potential threat seriously, keeping his hunter-killer ships out of range during initial contact. Now, as he led the last Raxian vessels toward the blue planet, his scales pulsed with patterns. "A vengeful red. No negotiation," he told his crew. "No specimens, just punishment." The ships entered Earth's atmosphere like vengeful meteors, their hulls glowing as they tore through clouds and air. The first descended over the Indian Ocean, turning sharply to approach Mumbai from the south. 20 million people looked up as the alien vessel positioned itself above the ancient city. In a Mumbai hospital, Dr. Kapoor was helping a patient celebrate the Raxian defeat when shadows darkened the windows. He rushed outside just in time to see a beam of intense green light emerge from the alien ship. The beam touched the city center, and the world turned white. The destruction of Mumbai took exactly 37 seconds. Where a vibrant city of life and color had stood for centuries, a smoking crater remained. Similar scenes played out over Cairo and Sydney. 3 of Earth's great cities, selected for maximum psychological impact, erased in minutes. 7 billion people watched in horror as emergency broadcasts showed the devastation. The death toll climbed past 10 million in the first hour. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Panic spread like wildfire. In the underground command center of the Global Space Defense Initiative, General Lee slammed her fist against the table. "Why weren't we prepared for this?" she demanded. A young lieutenant stepped forward. "Ma'am, Operation Moonfall is ready." General Lee's expression changed. "Activate immediately." On the far side of the moon, in a secret base built under the guise of a scientific outpost, Captain Okafor received the activation codes. He turned to his crew of 30 men and women, hidden on the lunar surface for the past year. "This is what we trained for," he said simply. "Activate the platforms." Across the lunar surface, what appeared to be ordinary craters suddenly shifted. Regolith and moon dust slid away as massive doors opened, revealing 23 orbital defense platforms, railguns capable of accelerating projectiles to near relativistic speeds. Fleet Commander Zorgval was directing his ships toward their next targets, London, Tokyo, and New York, when his sensor officer called out in alarm. "Energy signatures detected on the moon's surface." Before Zorgval could respond, the first salvo fired. From the moon's surface, silent in the vacuum of space, streams of depleted uranium rods accelerated to 15% of light speed. Each rod carried the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon, but required no explosives, just mass and velocity. The first ship, positioned over what remained of Sydney, had no time to react. 3 rods passed through it like bullets through tissue, paper, transferring their enormous energy as they did. The vessel didn't explode so much as disintegrate, torn apart by forces its designers had never contemplated. Zorgval ordered evasive maneuvers as his sensors detected more launches. His ship twisted in the atmosphere over London, its drives straining against Earth's gravity. 2 projectiles missed. The third clipped the ship's propulsion section, sending it into an uncontrolled spin. As his vessel plummeted toward the English Channel, Zorgval watched the third Raxian ship suffer, the same fate over the Pacific. In his final moments, as the ocean rushed up to meet him, the fleet commander realized a terrible truth. The humans had been prepared for a counterattack all along. They had anticipated everything. The wave from the crashed ship washed over coastal communities, adding to the day's devastation. But as night fell over a wounded Earth, people emerged from shelters to see the sky clear of alien vessels, for the first time in weeks. Humanity had paid a terrible price, 3 great cities and millions of lives, but they had stood against the galaxy's greatest power and survived. 1 year after the Raxian War, Dr. Kozlov stood at the edge of the Mumbai crater. Where 20 million people had once lived, a vast depression now stretched for kilometers, its glass-smooth sides reflecting the morning sun. Similar memorials were being built in Sydney and Cairo, monuments not just to those lost, but to humanity's introduction to the wider galaxy. A group of schoolchildren approached, led by their teacher. They wore simple uniforms and carried notebooks. Some stared at the crater with wide eyes. Others looked at Dr. Kozlov with something between awe and fear. Everyone knew her face now, the scientist who had helped create the weapons that saved humanity. "Dr. Kozlov," said the teacher, "thank you for meeting with my class. They've been studying the war." A small boy raised his hand. "Is it true you killed 1 million aliens?" The question struck her like a physical blow. In the immediate aftermath, humanity had celebrated the destruction of the Raxian fleet as an unqualified victory. Only later came the understanding of what they had done, the enormity of life extinguished, regardless of whether it threatened Earth. "We defended our home," she answered carefully. "Just as you would defend your family if someone tried to harm them." Another child spoke up. "My cousin says more aliens will come to get revenge. Is that true?" Dr. Kozlov looked at their young faces. How to explain galactic politics to children who should be worrying about games and homework, not interstellar threats? "The hegemony has retreated," she said. "Our last deep space probes detected their remaining ships leaving this sector of the galaxy. They've marked our solar system as a prohibited zone." She didn't mention the cost of that designation: 3 great cities reduced to ash, millions dead, and a humanity fundamentally changed by the knowledge that they were not alone in the universe and that the universe was not always kind. Later that day, Dr. Kozlov attended the opening ceremony for the new Global Defense Headquarters in Geneva. What had once been the United Nations complex was now the command center for Earth's unified military and scientific forces. Old national rivalries seemed petty after facing extinction together. The Secretary-General, a tall woman who had once led resistance fighters in Africa, greeted Dr. Kozlov warmly. "The lunar shipyards are ahead of schedule," she said, leading Kozlov to a viewing platform overlooking the construction of massive ion engines. "The first defensive fleet will be ready within 3 years." Dr. Kozlov nodded. Across the planet, resources that had once gone into consumer goods, entertainment and luxury items were now directed toward a single goal: ensuring humanity would never again be at the mercy of an alien power. "And the deep space listening posts?" asked Kozlov. "Operational as far as Neptune's orbit," replied the Secretary-General. "If anything larger than a shuttle approaches the solar system, we'll know." That evening, Dr. Kozlov sat on the balcony of her apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. A familiar tune played from a neighbor's window, one of the many songs written about Major Tanaka and the delegation who had sacrificed themselves to save Earth. They were heroes now, their names taught to schoolchildren alongside ancient warriors and explorers. Her tablet chimed with a notification, another breakthrough from the reverse engineering team working on salvaged Raxian technology. Faster than light travel might be possible within a decade. Humanity would venture to the stars sooner than anyone had imagined before the war, but they would go cautiously, armed with the knowledge that the universe was filled with both wonders and dangers. The naive dreams of peaceful first contact had died alongside millions in Mumbai, Cairo, and Sydney. In their place was a determined realism, a commitment to explore but also to protect. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Dr. Kozlov thought about the vastness beyond Earth's atmosphere. The Raxians were just one species in a galaxy teeming with life. Some might be allies, others enemies, most simply indifferent. But all would now know that humans, when pushed to the edge of extinction, had proven themselves willing to respond in kind, a species that chose to fight rather than submit. The stars no longer seemed to twinkle with innocent promise. They watched, cold and distant, as humanity prepared for whatever might come next from the depths of space. And humanity, scarred but unbroken, watched back.